In the darkness of the Mediterranean night, a luxury cruise ship carrying over 4,200 souls sliced through calm waters. Passengers dined under crystal chandeliers, champagne flowed, and live music filled the air. Then came the sound. Not a wave, not an engine. A deafening crack, like the world splitting open. The music stopped, the lights flickered, and within minutes one of the most advanced cruise ships ever built began to tilt. But as water flooded the lower decks and panic spread through the corridors, the captain's voice came over the intercom with a message. "Just a minor electrical problem. Everything is under control." It was a lie that would cost 32 people their lives. And as the massive vessel listed further into the darkness, the man responsible for those 4,200 lives made a decision that would shock the world. He walked away. This is the story of the Costa Concordia disaster, a tale of ego, cowardice, and the captain who abandoned his ship. Hey everyone, quick apology for the lack of stories lately. Life got a little hectic and I dropped the ball on uploading. But I promise things are changing. New stories are coming, and I'll be way more consistent from now on. Thanks for sticking with me, and get ready for today's story. The Costa Concordia wasn't just any cruise ship. Launched in 2005 from the Italian port of Genoa, it represented the pinnacle of maritime luxury and engineering. At 290 meters, nearly the length of 3 football fields, and standing as tall as a 17-story building, the Concordia was a floating city. Fine dining restaurants, swimming pools, grand theaters, cinemas, and lounges filled its 14-passenger decks. Costa Cruises had invested $612 million in this marvel, and it quickly became one of the most famous cruise ships in the world. The man entrusted with this floating palace was Captain Francesco Schettino. Tall, confident, with a commanding presence, Scutino had been with the ship since its inaugural journey in 2006. Crew members would later describe him as charismatic but arrogant, a man who enjoyed the power and prestige of his position. By January 2012, the Costa Concordia had completed countless Mediterranean voyages without incident. On January 13th, it departed on what should have been a routine 7-day cruise. The weather was perfect. The sea was calm. The 3,780 passengers from around the world settled in for what they believed would be the vacation of a lifetime. They had no idea they were sailing toward disaster. January 13th, 2012, 8:45 p.m. The Costa Concordia's route was clearly mapped out. It would pass between 2 islands, a small Italian island to the right and Giglio Island to the left, keeping a safe distance from both. But Captain Skatino had other plans. "Let's get closer to Giglio," he ordered. "We'll do a salute." This salute, sailing dramatically close to shore to impress both passengers and locals, was an unofficial tradition among some cruise captains. It was a showman's gesture, a display of skill and daring. It was also incredibly dangerous. But at this critical moment, Captain Scutino wasn't even on the bridge. He was in the dining hall, having dinner with a woman who wasn't on the passenger list, a former dancer he had invited aboard through personal connections. The navigation was left to his officers, and something went terribly wrong. By the time Scutino returned to the bridge, the ship was already veering dangerously off course. The officer had entered incorrect coordinates. The massive vessel was now just 800 meters from Giglio Island. What the navigation team didn't account for was the underwater topography. Beneath the surface, massive rocky outcrops extended far beyond the visible shoreline, directly in the Concordia's path. The captain ordered an emergency turn, but the momentum of a 114,000-ton ship cannot be easily arrested. At 9:45 p.m., the Costa Concordia slammed into a submerged rock formation. The impact tore a 50-meter gash in the hull. Seawater immediately began pouring into the engine room. Within moments, the ship lost power. Darkness spread through the vessel, and then panic. In the grand dining hall, the music stopped abruptly. Silverware rattled on tables, glasses toppled. Passengers looked around in confusion as emergency lights flickered on. Then came the announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a small technical problem with the electrical system. Please remain calm. Our technicians are working to resolve it." But this wasn't a small technical problem. 7 compartments, including the generator rooms, were already flooding. The engine room was completely underwater. The ship had begun to list noticeably to one side, and the crew knew it. Yet, for nearly 45 minutes after impact, passengers were told to return to their cabins. No evacuation order was given. No Mayday call was sent to the Coast Guard. Why? Investigators would later discover that Captain Skatino called the Costa Cruises Crisis Center before contacting emergency services. Company phone records revealed a series of calls between the captain and company executives in the critical minutes after impact. Was there an attempt to downplay the disaster? To handle it in-house before admitting the severity? Whatever the reason, precious time was lost. By 10:30 p.m., the ship's tilt had become severe. Objects slid across floors. Walking became difficult. Water poured into lower decks. Finally, the order came to abandon ship. But by then, the Concordia was listing so severely that lifeboats on one side hung uselessly over open air, while those on the other side couldn't be properly deployed against the hull. Chaos erupted. Families were separated in the darkness. Elderly passengers struggled to climb to higher decks as water rose below. Crew members with minimal evacuation training gave conflicting instructions. And through it all, one question echoed through the tilting corridors. Where was the captain? As the Costa Concordia tilted further onto its side, the Italian Coast Guard began receiving distress calls, not from the ship's bridge but from passengers using cell phones. Coast Guard vessels and helicopters raced to the scene. Local fishermen from Giglio Island launched their own boats to help. A massive rescue operation was underway. But when Coast Guard Commander Gregorio De Falco radioed the Concordia, he made a shocking discovery. Captain Scutino wasn't on the bridge. He wasn't coordinating the evacuation. He wasn't even on the ship. He had abandoned the Costa Concordia while hundreds of passengers were still trapped on board. The radio exchange that followed would become infamous worldwide. "Coast Guard, Scutino, listen to me. There are people trapped on board. You need to get back on the ship and coordinate the rescue. Is that clear?" Scutino, "But the ship is listing." Coast Guard, "I don't care. You get back on board. That is an order. There are already bodies, Scutino." Scutino, "How many bodies are there?" Coast Guard, "I don't know. All I know is that you're abandoning the rescue. Get back on that ship and tell me how many people are still on board and what they need. Now." Scutino, "Commander, I want to go back, but the other lifeboat is stopping." Coast Guard, "Get back on board, damn it, and call me immediately when you are on the ship." But Scutino never returned. From the safety of shore, he watched as his ship, and the passengers entrusted to his care, struggled in the darkness. Through the night, rescue operations continued. Coast Guard divers searched the submerged portions of the ship. Helicopters lifted survivors from the hull. Local residents opened their homes to the cold, wet passengers who made it to shore. By morning, most had been evacuated, but not all. The final death toll would reach 32 people. Some drowned in flooded cabins. Others fell into the sea during chaotic evacuations. A few suffered heart attacks brought on by the trauma. Among the dead were retirees on dream vacations, young couples celebrating anniversaries, and crew members who stayed behind to help others escape. The human cost was devastating. But what made it worse was the knowledge that many, perhaps all, of these deaths could have been prevented. If the ship had stayed on its approved course, if the evacuation had been ordered immediately after impact, if the captain had fulfilled his duty, the Costa Concordia disaster wasn't just a shipwreck, it was a catastrophic failure of leadership. The trial of Francesco Schettino began in July 2013. Prosecutors charged him with multiple counts of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck, and abandoning his vessel. His defense? He claimed he tripped and fell into a lifeboat. The evidence told a different story. Phone records showed he had called his family and friends after reaching shore. Security footage captured him dry and composed at a hotel while passengers were still being rescued. In February 2015, Schettino was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. But the Costa Concordia itself remained, a massive, rusting reminder of the tragedy, half submerged off the coast of Giglio Island for over 2 years. The salvage operation to remove it would become the most expensive and complex in maritime history. Engineers from around the world worked to right the massive vessel, secure it, and tow it away without causing an environmental catastrophe. In July 2014, the Costa Concordia was finally refloated. It was towed to Genoa, the very port where it was built, to be dismantled piece by piece. The cost of the salvage? Over $1.2 billion. The cost in human lives? Immeasurable. The Costa Concordia disaster changed the cruise industry forever. New safety regulations were implemented. Evacuation drills became mandatory before ships leave port. Captain training was enhanced. But the most profound lessons weren't about regulations or procedures. They were about human nature, about how ego and showmanship can cloud judgment, about how the desire to avoid bad publicity can delay critical decisions, about how one person's choices can affect thousands of lives, and, perhaps most importantly, about the ancient maritime principle that Captain Skatino violated. The captain must be the last to leave a sinking ship. This principle isn't just tradition. It's about responsibility, about duty, about the moral obligation of those in command to protect the people in their care, even at personal risk. The Costa Concordia now exists only in photographs and memories. Its steel has been recycled, its furnishings sold or scrapped, but its legacy lives on, a stark reminder that leadership isn't about privilege or prestige. It's about service. It's about sacrifice. And sometimes it's about staying with the ship until the very end. The story of the Costa Concordia isn't just about a shipwreck. It's about the choices we make when faced with crisis and the consequences that follow. If this investigation into one of modern history's most shocking maritime disasters has captivated you, there's more where this came from. Hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of truth seekers. Every week, we bring you meticulously researched stories that reveal the dark side of human nature and the light of those who rise above it. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on Captain Skatino's actions. Should his sentence have been longer? Would you have done anything differently if you were on that ship? And don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next investigation. And here is another mysterious stories you can watch. Thanks for watching.